While it's not explicit, the contents of this podcast may not be suitable for younger ears. Parent discretion is advised. What do you do when you find out that your young child, somewhere around the age of 7, is touching people inappropriately, is doing things that are, well, put your son in a sexually compromised position? That is our tricky question today. G'day and welcome to the Happy Families podcast. Real parenting solutions every day on Australia's most downloaded parenting podcast. We are Justin and Kylie Coulson, and every Tuesday on the pod, we answer your tricky questions. They can be about the most mundane things and also about the most challenging things. It can be niche or general, family, relationships, well-being, discipline, just life. If you'd like to submit a tricky question, we've got a super simple system at happyfamilies.com.au. Just scroll down to podcasts, click the record button and start talking. Or you can send us a voice note to podcasts@happyfamilies.com.au. We received the following from Liz in Melbourne.
Hi, Dr. Justin. Elizabeth from Melbourne. I have a 7-year-old boy in grade 2. He's performing some actions of touching or tapping girls on the bottom and trying to lift their skirts and smell where they've been sitting sometimes as well. It does scare me to think this behaviour could lead to other things when he's older. I believe he's the only one that's in his class or school that's doing this, and I'm really unsure about how to tackle this issue and would love if you could offer any advice, please.
I know you asked for tricky questions. This is a tricky one. This is a really tricky one. And I usually have heaps to say, but today I actually am probably going to defer a lot to you in relation to this. You are writing a book all about boys, and I think while I might have some things to add a little bit of colour to what you're sharing, I'd like to hear what you've got to say. Yeah,
I mean, I hear this question and it reminds me of so many things that parents have said to me when they find out that I'm writing a book about boys. I had one mum of 4, 2 boys, 2 girls. Her name was Brooke. She said, and this is a direct quote, I'm using this in chapter 1 of my book. She said, quote, "I find it kind of scary to be raising boys. It's so different to girls. I'm worried about different things. It's just scarier." And what I find is that the questions that parents ask about boys often just hit differently, because when you hear a question like what Elizabeth's asked, there's a magnitude, there's a heft, there's a thunk to it. If you were to drop it on the table, it would land differently to a lot of the questions that we hear about girls. Not that it's a competition, but worth highlighting. Kylie, let's start with identifying the difference between natural curiosity and concerning behaviour. So it's completely normal for children aged somewhere between 4 and 8, 5 and 8 to start getting really curious about gender, about bodies. I mean, this is when around 3 or 4 is where kids start playing doctors and nurses. But from about 4, 5, 6, that's where they step into, well, this is what a girl does and this is what a boy does. They see gender. They're curious about their bodies. They have lots of awkward questions. Totally normal development. The behaviour that we're discussing today, touching other kids on the backside, trying to lift skirts, smelling where girls have been sitting, this goes beyond what you'd consider to be normal curiosity. Also, it's only going one way. It's not like Elizabeth said, he's doing it to everybody. It's not like other boys are copying this treatment. It is only girls that he's doing it to.
And from her understanding, he's the only one. So it's not like there's a cohort of boys that are all kind of having, egging each other on. This is individual behaviour.
It's deviating from the norm in a way that is not healthy, not functional, not typical. And other kids are being affected as well. So we need immediate intervention. Shortly, I want to speculate about where this kind of behaviour comes from, especially in young children. We'll talk about that. But that's sort of moving away from Elizabeth's question. And what we really need to do is address the issue immediately. To me, that's the most important thing to do. So first off, we need to take immediate action on an issue like this. This isn't the sort of thing where we fluff around. Clear, simple, direct communication. We keep our hands to ourselves. Everybody's body belongs to them. It's not about shaming, but we have to be really clear to our child. It's not okay for this to occur. Now, we can explore why. We can try to understand what's going on later, and we'll talk about that in the second half of the podcast. But my immediate response is there just needs to be a very clear line in the sand. This is a boundary. We do not cross it. The transgression around this is significant and it's concerning. And it ties in with consent. I'm an ambassador for the federal government's Consent Can't Wait campaign. Just a couple of things on this. Now, consent at this age typically isn't about issues of morality and sexuality and touching, but sometimes it needs to be. It's about respecting boundaries. in every interaction. So we want to teach kids that if someone doesn't want to hug, you don't hug them. If someone says no to tickling, you don't tickle them. If someone says, no, you can't borrow my toys, you can't borrow my toys. If someone's getting changed in the bathroom and they want privacy, you give them privacy. When it comes to body safety, your body belongs to you. Other people's bodies belong to them. We have to practice asking permission. If you wouldn't ask that girl permission, can I lift up your skirt, then it's not okay to do it. And if you would ask that girl permission, then you need to understand what boundaries are. And again, we'll talk about where this is coming from in a sec.
I think it's really, really easy when we are placed in situations like this. Like, I can't imagine getting a phone call from the school principal and being told that this is what my child's doing. And so as a parent, it can be really, really easy in that moment to catastrophize and project where this behaviour will lead in the future, and therefore treat our child differently in that process. Elizabeth, based on her message, is sounding quite level-headed at the moment, but over time, it can be really easy to just get caught up in the emotion of everything and why is my child doing this? And if we can just, as parents, take it a notch down and deal with today. Don't even think about what tomorrow looks like or what next week or next year. Just focus on today because your child needs you today.
Yeah. And again, those are really clear, simple conversations, direct. I'm going to recommend Michelle Mitchell's books, The Girl's Guide and The Guy's Guide to Puberty, and also Where Do Babies Come From? Maybe these conversations aren't happening enough, or maybe we need to get a lot more clear and direct about it. Michelle also does a great job about talking about consent in Where Do Babies Come From? A couple of other things that I think are important. I would be speaking with the school about it. They're obviously talking with you, so get on the same team, be aligned, and find out what can be done in a school context. So is there a possibility that there can be a little bit more supervised play? That the teacher and their school counsellor need to know what's going on. Schools will have protocols for this situation, and we need to make sure that there are consistent boundaries between home and school. But fundamentally, I think this is one of those ones where, as parents, we need to be right on top of it. And there may be cause for professional help. After the break, I want to talk about where that might come from and why you might need to go down the professional route. Not certain, but I'm pretty sure that we would need to go there. Two other things. We need to understand where it's coming from. So that's, like I said, after the break. And also we've got to monitor online access. I don't know. We just don't have any information about what he might have been exposed to, but we want to make sure that that he's not being exposed to inappropriate content, explicit content online. After the break, we'll talk about where this could be coming from and effective ways that we can have deeper conversations with our son about problematic sexual behaviour. Okay, so we have a very tough, very tricky question, Kylie. A handful of things in terms of here's how the conversation needs to go. You need to make sure that he stops. You need to make sure that consent's being taught. Need to work with the school to protect people who may otherwise be harmed. That's kind of the guts of what we've talked about so far.
So while I think that everything that you're sharing is so important and we need that immediate action like you suggested, at this point, what you've given us is everything that needs to be done to our child or for our child. And I think the next step has to be, how do we work with our child? You talk about the 3 E's of discipline, and I think that this really touches beautifully with how do we now tap into a place of curiosity to explore what is going on for our child, what is kind of causing this behaviour, and then explaining why this behaviour isn't appropriate, and then exploring how we can empower him.
Yeah. So part of me wants to say this should be the process from the beginning, but the reason that I stepped in with direction immediately is because of the seriousness of the situation.
Yeah, I agree.
Just got to nip it in the bud. We've got to make it really clear. There's a boundary. It's being crossed. You can't do that. But once emotions have settled, once everyone's feeling better, you're exactly right. This is the kind of thing where we sit down and say, hey, buddy, where's this coming from? Like, this is not what any of your friends do. This is not what other 7-year-olds do.
Have you seen other people doing this? Like,
yeah, where is it coming from? And by doing a really deep dive on this, exploring, that's where we're going to start to probably make the most progress and be more effective in long-term limit setting. The thing that you're probably going to come across here, though, is you've got a son who's going to say, I don't know. going to shrug shoulders, going to get really defensive, and going to be absolutely terrified of getting in trouble. So this is where I start to speculate. Elizabeth hasn't given us any indication that this is going on, and it may not have been going on, but here are my primary suspicions with this kind of behaviour. Typically, this is learned behaviour. This is modelled behaviour. It's not the sort of stuff that kids just invent, although sometimes they can. So let's start with the sometimes that they can, and then we'll go into, unfortunately, the darker things that could be going on. There are some kids who are naturally more exploratory. They haven't learned appropriate limits. They don't know how to regulate. They're not big on inhibition. They're curious, and they don't either understand or respect personal boundaries. If this is your son, maybe there's some kind of neurological challenge that's going on, some sort of learning issue. Again, we don't have details. Then there is a different pathway to help than the one that I'm focused on in terms of going and getting professional help, because there's some deviant behaviour here. It may simply be that there are inhibition and regulatory concerns. I hope that's what it is. I really do. My deeper concern is that we've got a 7-year-old boy who has been exposed to troubling sexual behaviour in one of a couple of ways. Either it's been modelled by what he's seen on a screen, or it's been modelled by what has been done to him. There are all kinds of external influences that are out there. Kids copy what they observe. If they've seen inappropriate touching in the media or at home or elsewhere, then they might replicate it without really understanding why it's wrong. They'll know that it's wrong, but they won't understand why. We know that the average age of exposure to explicit content, pornography, is around the age of 11 in Australia. The data is not strong. It's not good quality data. But even if it's right, 50% of kids under the age of 11 are being exposed to pornography. It shows unhealthy power dynamics. It can normalise inappropriate behaviour before kids have any idea at all of what they're seeing. And so that is a problem. And there is the awful risk that maybe somebody has touched him or modelled that behaviour for him, or even just talked about it because he's been hanging around with big kids in the neighbourhood, up the street, on camp, at school, on the bus, those kinds of things. There's one more place that this could have come from, Kylie. And again, I'm uncomfortable sharing this, but it's a reality that there are some kids who are just born with what's known as a dark triad of personality traits. So this is narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy or sociopathy. It's pretty rare that you see a 7-year-old sociopath, right? But every now and again, you'll find children who have tendencies towards this. If this sort of behaviour, not necessarily the sexual behaviour, but if there's this narcissistic or aggressive behaviour to other people playing out across contexts, then that's what it could be. Here's the reality. Some boys test boundaries so that they can feel important and feel in control. And what looks like sexually explorative behaviour might actually be dominance behaviour. So they're seeking status through making other people feel uncomfortable and trying to get reactions that way.
So I don't want to make light of anything that you've said, but my one concern for this little 7-year-old boy is he, number one, gets labelled, and number two, gets treated differently, which actually, in essence, makes him feel worse about himself, right?
Right, yep.
And therefore, he will continue to act out in various ways because that's almost become the expectation of who he is now. So the only thing as a mother I would be suggesting is just be cautious about how you move forward with this in relation to how other people deal with him. Like in the school setting, I've just watched it too many times. This child gets ostracised from teachers,
right,
which then plays out in the playground. Like it just, yeah.
Yeah, I was pretty soft on whether or not you should or shouldn't get help. My initial thought is address it, deal with it, and if it stops, you're good. But if there is repeated behaviour, if you find out that he's got an internet search history that's problematic, if you find out pretty much everything that I've talked about, the status-seeking behaviour, the challenges neurologically, if there are any of those, the external influences, the possibility that he's engaging in viewing explicit behaviour or has been touched, every single one of those things makes me think you need to get professional help. So,
yeah, and that's an absolute. Like, please don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
This has to be addressed, but the way we address it actually is more important than.
It's not about putting a label on.
No.
Labels belong on jars, not on people. So again, the steps, just to be clear, address it in the home initially. Do some exploratory work once you've just drawn that line in the sand. Make sure that he knows nothing he can tell you is going to make you stop loving him. You'll love him much more than anything that he could tell you. It will be safe. He's got to know. The conversation literally goes like this. I want to ask you some hard questions. I want you to know, no matter what you tell me, you can literally tell me absolutely anything and I will still love you. You are not in trouble. You are only surrounded by love and goodness, and we want to help you. But I've got to ask you these hard questions, and then ask questions about whether he's viewed pornography, whether somebody at school's shown it to him, or whether he's watching at home, whether somebody's ever touched him, whether kids at school are talking about sexually explicit things and he's decided to act out on it. Ask the direct questions. Reassure, you're not in trouble. We love you too much to get you in trouble, but we do need to help you to stop doing this. And also ask him, how do you feel about touching girls and lifting skirts and doing these things? How does it make you feel? So that you can really get an understanding of what's going on.
And how do you think other people are feeling when you're doing it to them, or
empathy.
When they're watching?
Right.
They're watching this happen. How do they feel about you? How are they going to interact with you in the future? Perspective taking is huge.
If you can stop it here and now, then it doesn't need to go further. But if there is anything that comes up in terms of modelling, abuse, viewing explicit material in an ongoing way, status seeking, dominance, misogyny, or a neurological challenge, then you absolutely need professional help. Tricky question. Elizabeth, we hope that was helpful. Thank you very much for asking the question. If you would like to submit your tricky question, we've got that super simple system at happyfamilies.com.au. You literally press the record button and start talking, or send us a voice note to podcasts@happyfamilies.com.au. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rulon from Bridge Media. More information and more resources for making your family happier are available at happyfamilies.com.au.